Hi everyone, so it's Ren speaking. I hope you're doing very well. Speaking to you from my sofa today because it's comfortable and I hope it is a pleasant enough angle for you as well. Let me know in the comments if that's the case. I want to return today to this first challenge I proposed, to the idea that there is a straight narrative that we can articulate, a straight causal narrative that we can articulate from function use, practice of function use, to function mastery, that is to say, functional integration. So that the narrative would be something like, well, if I put myself in situations where I have to use this function a lot, then eventually I will, by kind of an automatic process, will integrate it. In other words, I will automatize my use of it. And by automatizing my use of it, I will ensure that its integration is enshrined in my psyche. Now, INFJs reason in this way. A lot of INFJs who are very into the idea of self-improvement, can often have this approach to the SE function. Okay, and I said in a recent video, which was quite recent video, where I really had my first epiphany in relation to that, in relation to the narrative that I guess I myself, consciously or not, largely subscribed to. This idea that the more you use a function by some sort of inevitable causal narrative, the inevitable second stage is more integration until the fullest integration that you can get to. So if we talk about the SE function in INFJs and INTJs, perhaps full integration is not possible, but just to give a rough, description, just for the sake of illustration, if an INFJ can achieve let's say a 60 to 70% integration of the SE function, the causal narrative will be something like, well, if I put myself in situations where I have to use SE a lot, eventually I'll get to 60 to 70% integration, and that's all I can hope for. That's the most I can hope for, but I can achieve that. And once that's achieved, SE will be enshrined in my psyche and I'll have SE integrated. I won't need to worry about SE. In a sense, I will have transcended my own type. I will have got to a stage where I don't really have an inferior function anymore, because look at me. The inferior function, that is my function, is only just fourth slot. It's not really inferior. I mean, come on, like, it's 60 to 70% integrated. So it does become a little bit artificial to talk about an inferior function in such a case if it is 60 to 70% integrated. But the question remains, is that a realistic view of things? Is it a realistic view of this state of affairs? Now, I want to question this, and the reason why I want to question this is I question the causal narrative itself. I don't think there is anything like a straight narrative, a straight causal chain from extensiveness of use toward maximal integration. It's just not the way it works. It's just not the way it works. And so, again, we want to talk about SE, right, in the case of INFJs and INTJs, because SE is the blind spot, SE is the inferior, and SE is in many ways the source of all our bungling and clumsiness, as much practical as it is intellectual. And we see this function, the SE function, as in many ways the key to our ultimate well-being. We see it as the key to our individuation, in other words, okay? And what I want to emphasize is this fundamental difference between using a function, right, and a function using you, okay? In a sense, our life in relation to SE follows much more the pattern of, we're in situations where, sure, we can see that we're using SE a great deal. But first of all, we kind of always seem to be using it in the same way. It's kind of a low resolution, it's not very precise. That's also, of course, a reflection of its relatively low level of integration. But also, we don't really have any say over this use. Notice how, in a fairly well-integrated INFJ, the INFJ can, in fact, be fairly aware of when and how they're using their FE. If they are, again, very integrated, they also will get to a stage where they are fairly aware of when and how they're using TI. They can be aware of how and when they're using FE and TI together. There's conscious use, right? It's not just use, it's conscious use. And there's certainly a correlation, a very strong correlation between the ability to, if you like, relate to your functions as, I don't want to say servants, but as collaborators that you can summon whenever you need them. And control and mastery, which are themselves indicative of integration. So when you have a function well integrated, you can basically marshal them when you need them and be aware of what you're doing, and if the process feels relatively seamless and relatively effortless. That's the existential and experiential manifestation of good functional integration. Now, what could be confusing is that I sometimes talk as if NI happens to INFJs, that NI is in the driver's seat more so than the subject of the INFJ himself or herself. And therefore, someone might be entitled to ask, but then isn't that not a sign that NI would not be dominant at all? No, the dominance, just like the inferior, has a peculiar relationship to the subject, to the person. They're not like the auxiliary and the tertiary. The inferior feels like it happens to the person without their say, without any kind of influence or control. You could say that the person endures the inferior function a lot of the time. Yes, it's used, yes, it's there, but it's endured, without any sort of agency over it. Whereas the dominant function, when it is related to in a healthy way by the person, yes, it has its own way, yes, it takes care of itself, but whereas in the case of the inferior function, the person endures the function, SE in this case, whereas in the case of the dominant, the person enjoys letting it be unhindered, knowing full well they have the power to stop that. They have the power to repress it because they are very closely linked to it, right? NI in particular, right? NI, given the specific attributes of the NI function, it needs to operate unhindered, but you can stop that. You can interfere. Maybe that will give you an illusion of mastery over the function, but in fact you'll be interfering because the destiny of one's relationship to the dominant function is to enjoy letting it roam, is to enjoy letting it have the driver's seat. But you're enjoying it all the more since it is a decision you make at some level. There's no decision making of that description at all in the case of the inferior function, at least when the inferior function is in a state of, strong disintegration or just non-integration. It happens to you. You suffer its presence, you suffer its use, you don't enjoy it. There's agency in the case of the dominant, and there's very little agency in the case of the inferior function. And the problem is that a lot of people think that if they put themselves every day through situations where they have to use the SE function, again, speaking of INFJs and INTJs, they'll eventually integrate it. And that's just not true. If you put yourself in a situation where, yes, technically you are using SE, but in fact, what's really happening is that SE is using you and you are enduring SE's use of you, of your body, of your reactions and stuff, there's no reason to imagine that in the next iteration you won't continue to just endure it. right? There needs to be another shift to give, if you like, an alternative narrative of how this enduring the inferior functions agency over your own agency. Oh yeah, you do use the fourth function all the time, but are you using it or is it using you? Are you enjoying it or are you enduring it? Right? How can we move from enduring, if not to enjoying, because I think that is really specific to how we relate to the dominant function, Ni in our case, but at least to summoning, to marshalling, to being aligned with a certain sense of maybe not control, but management. How can SE work for us rather than SE domineering us, lording it over us, making us endure it? That's the question. And we're going to explore that in more depth in the next video. Okay, guys, so if you enjoyed the video, give me a like. I always appreciate it and helps with the referencing massively. You know that there are 2 books that you can check out if you're into knowing more about INFJs in particular. The Infinite Soul is my latest book, INFJ Life in the Modern World. Check it out at the link below. It's all about how INFJs can find happiness, purpose, and value in the world today that they often find hostile and with reason. Okay, check the reviews. It's helped a lot of people. So has the prequel, the well-known prequel to the Infinite Soul, which is the Ecstatic Soul, a new look at the INFJ personality. No book goes deeper into the mind of the INFJ. What's it like to be an INFJ? What's it like to think like an INFJ? Want to know more? Check the link below as well. And as usual, guys, don't forget my Patreon is the lifeblood of my channel. I could not do this without you and your kind support. So please consider joining my Patreon. The link is below. You get access to some pretty cool perks too, like our Discord server, the Fourfold, where a lot of really interesting people are already active. You can interact with me there pretty much every day, as well as every 2-3 weeks, a bonus video where I go in depth about a topic of your choosing, only for patrons. We already have a nice library of those and it's going to continue. So if that sounds good to you, see you on Patreon down there. Looking forward to seeing you there and see you soon, guys. Bye-bye.